Most of us know Pixar as the established, dominating animation studio that it is today, responsible for some of the greatest animated movies of our time. But the truth is that this massively successful studio came from a very humble beginnings. In fact, on its first few years, the studio was constantly on the verge of bankruptcy, losing millions of dollars, even after the success of Toy Story. In this video, I'll tell you the story behind Pixar, and how founding it was made possible thanks to three very different people with very different talents. The story of how Pixar came to be revolves around three major players: an artist, a scientist, and a businessman, all three working together yet separately to one day find each other and create something amazing. The artist of this story is a guy named John Lasseter. You've probably heard that name. John would become an Academy Award-winning director, responsible for some of Pixar's greatest films, including Toy Story. But back in 1975, he was a freshman at a brand new program at CalArts, learning Disney-style animation. The program was taught by industry legends, including some of Disney's 9 old men. His classmates included Tim Burton and Brad Bird, who would later become prolific filmmakers themselves. This was a very exciting and creative environment for an animation student. During his time at CalArts, John created 2 Student Academy Award-winning films, and after graduation, he got his dream job. He was hired by the Walt Disney Animation Studios. During his time at Disney, working as an animator, he stumbled upon computer animation. He had an idea for making an animated film using computer graphics for the environment and pencil animation for the characters. He pitched that idea to Disney executives, and they told him, "The only reason we would consider using computer for animation is if it'll make it faster or cheaper." Shortly after that pitch, John was fired from the studio. At about the same time, George Lucas hired a guy named Ed Catmull to develop film editing system and digital sound editing system, all to advance computer graphics and create groundbreaking visual effects for his films. Ed Catmull grew up loving animation, watching cartoons and all Disney films his entire childhood. He gave up his dream of becoming an animator, thinking he wasn't good enough, and pursued a career in science. He studied computer science in the University of Utah, where he earned his doctorate and has made groundbreaking work in the field of computer imagery. He was then asked to run the computer graphics lab in the New York Institute of Technology. Ed was a brilliant scientist, responsible for some of the most commonly used principles of computer animation, such as Z-buffer, texture mapping, and subdivision services. He basically invented 3D graphics as we know it. While working at Lucasfilms, Ed asked John to join his division after meeting him at an industry event, both having the same dream of one day making the first computer animated feature film. The two hit it off right away, but at that time, 1983, that dream was still far away. That division in Lucasfilms, then called the Computer Graphics Division, produced some of the most revolutionary uses of computer imagery in films for that time. They produced the first completely computer-generated scene in Star Trek Wrath of Khan and the first computer-generated character for young Sherlock Holmes. Within that small division, John made the world's first animated short film using computer animation, The Adventures of Andre and Wally B. Creating such complex imagery required building a powerful custom-made computer. That computer was called the Pixar Image Computer. Because of the high demand for computer imagery and advanced computer graphics in other industries, the Computer Graphics Division was reimagined as Pixar. Still dreaming on making a computer animated full-length feature, a dream George Lucas had no interest in, Ed looked for an investor to fund such a huge undertaking. But for a long time, there were no takers. Meanwhile, at Cupertino, Steve Jobs, who was recently fired from Apple, founded his next company called, Next. Steve was one of the prospect investors called to take a look at Pixar, and he decided to invest. He bought Pixar from George Lucas for $5 million, throwing an additional $5 million to keep the company running. After the acquisition, the team wanted to make another animated short to establish who they were and stay on the track of filmmaking. John, who loved animating inanimate objects, single-handedly animated a short film about a lamp and its offspring, titled Luxo Jr. That short film was later nominated for an Academy Award and was the first computer-generated short to ever receive that nomination. The lamp from that film then became Pixar's mascot. Despite the massive potential though, Pixar was still struggling. They were licensing their rendering software, RenderMan, which became the industry standard for visual effects in films, used in major pictures such as Jurassic Park, but despite that, they still couldn't turn a profit. They started doing commercials, getting clients like Trident and Tropicana. They did medical visualization, seismic imaging, they sold their hardware, the Pixar image computer, which was very expensive. Yet, with all their effort, they couldn't make their product commercially viable enough to sustain themselves. Steve Jobs was losing about $1 million every year for 5 years. The dire financial problems didn't stop the team from making more computer animated shorts. Their third film, Tin Toy, telling the story of toys trying to escape a terrifying baby, won the Academy Award in 1988. Disney, who not that long ago before had fired John, saw the success of his shorts and asked him to come back and direct a feature film for them. This was a lifelong dream for John, and he was currently working at a company on the brink of bankruptcy. Yet he refused Disney, and he stayed with Pixar, still dreaming to make the first computer animated feature film. After the success of Tin Toy, the idea of an entire film from the toy's point of view stuck with him, and despite refusing Disney not too long beforehand, he knew that if he wanted to make a fully length film, they would need the financial support of a larger studio for marketing and distribution. Disney was the perfect candidate. He pitched them the idea, and they loved it. At that time, animated feature had only one style, the Disney style. That style was so established that when Tom Hanks was asked to do a voice for the film, he asked, "You're not gonna make me sing, are you?" But the people at Pixar wanted to do it differently. They had a set of rules they set for themselves. There would be no song,
Mr. I'll make a man out of you.
no "I want" moment,
I want to be where the people are.
no happy village,
Bonjour! 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 Bonjour!
no love story, and no villain. This went against everything that was proving to be working in the animation industry at the time. Despite their drive to do something different, Disney executives were at their backs giving them notes and ideas. They were the experienced studio and they thought they knew what makes animated films work. After a year of preparation, working on storyboards and story reels, guided by Disney, they screened the pitch of what would later become Toy Story. Disney hated it. It wasn't funny, it wasn't moving, Woody was a horrible character. The film was clearly not working. Disney shut down production the next day. This could have been the end for Pixar. However, John did not give up on the story he believed in. Within a period of 3 weeks, with the talented yet small team, he completely redid the story like he originally wanted to, without all the notes and ideas from experienced Disney executives. They had a second screening, and this time the story worked. Production was back on track. The film took almost 5 years to make, and in 1995 it was released to become the highest grossing film of that year, making $192 million domestically and $362 million worldwide. The film got 3 Oscar nominations, and John received the Special Achievement Award for making the first computer animated feature film. It seemed like Pixar was in the clear. The studio was now a success and their worries were over, but that was not the case. There was one big problem. According to the deal they made with Disney, Pixar didn't have the rights to any of the profits for merchandise, and in fact barely made any money from the film. They were still struggling financially. They decided that their only choice was to go public in order to raise capital. They went on to be the biggest IPO of 1995, exceeding even Netscape, raising $132 million. Disney wanted to renew their agreement to distribute more Pixar films, and they signed a new contract to produce 5 more films together over the period of 10 years, this time dividing the profits 50-50. Pixar was still, however, a single success story so far. Not sure if Toy Story was just a fluke, so it was their second film that would determine the future of the studio. Luckily, A Bug's Life would become the most successful animated film of that year. The studio started growing rapidly, and their headquarters became too small to host a number of people in it. Steve had his eyes on a huge lot in Emerville, and there he designed the new Pixar headquarters based around the idea of open space and unplanned collaboration. A huge space where people from different departments can run into each other, instead of being segregated in small rooms on different floors. And then finally in 2000, the Pixar team has moved to its new location and stayed there ever since. They proceeded to break their own records time and time again, making some of the most successful animated films in history, but troubles were still to come. The contract with Disney was up, and their relationship went sour. That could have been the end for their collaboration, but Disney had the rights to keep making sequels to Pixar films if they wanted to, and John couldn't bear the thought of it. It was like having your kids being raised by someone else. Luckily for everyone, Disney went through a much-needed change of leadership, and Bob Iger took over as president. With the goal of reviving the Disney studio back to its glory days, on his first week as president, Bob called Steve for a meeting. He wanted to merge the two companies together, feeling that Pixar knew something that Disney had forgotten. This seemed like a horrible thought to the people working at Pixar, after their negative experience with Disney, and the fear of losing their identity was great. But Steve felt that Bob was different, and had the right idea for the future of the two companies. They worked hard for a long time on a contract, and in 2006, Disney bought Pixar for $7.4 billion. That deal made Steve Jobs the largest shareholder at Disney, John Lasseter the chief creative officer of both Disney and Pixar, including overseeing all of Disney's theme parks, and Ed Catmull the president of Pixar and Disney Animation Studios. The studio went on to keep producing hit after hit, winning multiple Academy Awards, and in 2010, Toy Story 3 became the highest-grossing animated film of all time. After years of struggle, uncertainty, and living in fear of shutting down, Pixar had made it, all thanks to the devotion and talent of one artist, one scientist, and one businessman. Thanks for watching.